Hi everyone, thanks for having me. It's great to be here back in Rio, a city that I love very much. So, my name is Chris Dannon. I'm a technology journalist from New York. I cover business, design, and technology. I can tell you a little bit more about Fast Company if you've never read it. We cover all the major technology corporations. We cover innovation in business. We cover the people that are really shaking things up across industries. So not just in the internet, but also companies that are moving into traditional sectors of the economy and doing really interesting new things. So my experience has been to visit a lot of technology companies and startups and to learn what really makes them innovative. In other words, how do they make something that people love? This is the goal of everyone in this room, I'm guessing. It's my goal. At the end of the day, I want people to read the articles that I write and to be informed by them and entertained by them and to appreciate them. And I think every hacker and maker and artist ultimately wants to make something that people can connect with, that they understand, that makes them feel human. But this is the most difficult thing to do. It is not intuitive. Just because you are a human doesn't mean that you can make something that people love. It requires a lot of thought. So this presentation is about some of the strategies that you can use in your mind to make this easier. Make something that you know. So this is Tristan Walker. He used to work for Foursquare, and now he is the president and CEO of Bevel. This is a razor for shaving your face, and it's built especially for black men. Tristan realized that over years and years of shaving, that the razors that he was buying weren't really compatible with his skin and his hair type. So he set about making a razor that made sense for black men, and it sells incredibly well. So if you're thinking about what to make, try to solve a problem that you know very intimately, a problem that you experience every day. Don't try to solve someone else's problem if you don't know who they are or you don't know what they do every day. Solve problems that you're familiar with. Make things for the people that you want to admire you. Does anyone know about Face Mash? So, why did Mark Zuckerberg build Face Mash? He built Face Mash so his friends would think he was a cool guy. This is about the best incentive to make something that a person can have. It provides a lot of motivation. If you can make something and show it to your friends and family, and they love it, it's going to really encourage you. If you're making something for some audience that's out there in the world that you've never met, you're going to have trouble continuing on because you really need that feedback. Make something that wasn't possible yesterday. I frequently get pitched from publicity companies about new social networks, and I almost never write about them because social networks are not new anymore. I chose this photo because just a few weeks ago, Apple in iOS 8 made it possible to create a custom keyboard, which had never been possible before. So if you're a programmer who makes iOS apps, this is a great opportunity because no one has ever built a keyboard like this before. And you can take a new tool that Apple created and you can make something totally unique. If you're building a social network, it's almost impossible to create something new because people have been building social networks on the internet since the late 1980s. So look for opportunities, look for new tools, and try to make new things. Think about the mechanism first and design second. When I say a mechanism, what I'm talking about is a distinctive interaction that is unique to the app. So in Tinder, it's swipe left or swipe right. This mechanism is starting to be used for all kinds of things. So for food, swipe left, swipe right. There's an app that does that now. So you can find restaurants near you with the same interface as Tinder. So you know you're on to something really clever in the software world when you can take the mechanism and apply it to different content and it still works. So this says, if you're not sure it exists, Google it. many people come to me with app ideas, friends of mine and family members, and they say, I want to build this app. And they go on to describe something that I already have on my phone. And immediately they're so sad. Whoa. But when you're thinking of ideas, Google everything you think of. Don't protect your ideas as if they're precious. Chances are you're going to see that something already exists that is similar, but maybe that'll spring to life a new idea, or it'll help you understand how your version could be different. It's really important. It's really important to know what already exists in the marketplace. Don't treat any project like it's your baby. This is a little image of a man walking away with his back to us. You should be prepared to abandon every project you start at the drop of a hat. Because ultimately, if you become attached to your projects, you lose sight of the important thing, which is making something that other people can connect with. And if you become emotional about the things that you build, it can become a liability. You should really treat them like experiments, kind of the way that nature makes hundreds of types of birds and then lets the best ones survive. You should do that with your own projects. Always cheat on your projects with other projects. If you know, he had 14 girlfriends outside of his marriage, which is why he's making that face, because he was caught. So this is like the last slide. It's anytime you find yourself investing a lot in one project, stop yourself and start something new just for fun. Because what will happen is when you invest a lot of time and energy into one project, you become very serious about it, and it starts to become tied up with your self-esteem. And the only way to escape that and to have fun again is to start a new thing and have fun with that. You always need to be having fun, or creativity becomes very dull work. Every year, release an album. This is an idea that comes from my friends who make music, and I'm so envious of them, because about once a year, they create something very beautiful for all of their friends to enjoy. And I've often thought that I should start doing this. I should start putting together a collection of my articles once a year and really perfecting them and putting together like this collection that I can send to my friends. So whatever art or science you're working on, consider the idea of doing an annual project to show people what you're working on. Because it sort of forces you to take stock. Where am I this year? Is this where I wanted to be with my projects? Is this where I want to be next year? It sort of forces you to look at yourself from the outside. And while you're making things, please tell your story on social networks. Show your friends and family what you're working on. Take pictures of things as they're in progress. People are interested in what you're building, but they may not understand it if they're not in the world of technology. And they may be embarrassed to ask you, what is this thing? Why are you building it? What does it do? Even if they don't understand, a lot of times they'll tell you, this is really cool. They're lying. They don't know. So make sure that you take the time to show them where all your time is being spent. This one I think no one will disagree with. This is about karma. If you help other makers solve their problems, they'll help you. Go onto message boards, go onto Reddit, look for people who are interested in the same kind of projects as you, and start talking. I have a great story about a friend of mine named JJ. JJ lives in Greenland, which is very far from New York, both in distance and culture. And JJ sent me an email about 2 years ago, before I knew him. I had no idea who JJ was. And he said, my name's JJ, I'm from Greenland, and I'm building apps. And I've read your articles, and I would love your opinion on some of my apps. And I said, okay, send me what you have. And his ideas were pretty good, but they weren't great. I had seen some similar things. And so I just sent him some feedback. And he asked me more questions, and I sent him more feedback. And we kept talking, and over the course of the last 2 years, we've become close friends. And he just raised $500,000 for his startup. And he made all these relationships with investors. And now I have a connection to his network, just because I took the time to reply to his email, because I thought he was a genuine, and creative and talented person. So when you see these people, these genuine, talented, creative people, hold on to them and help them and keep in touch. And not just on Facebook, but make sure you see them face to face. Eventually, those relationships can blossom into something that you might not ever expect. You can't be an expert in everything, but you can be aware of everything. It's sad but true that many people get so involved with their own projects that they stop reading about what the rest of the world is working on. That's a bad thing. You really want to be tapped in to other makers, not just in Rio, not just in Brazil, but in all countries. See what people like you are doing in Japan or in Spain, and absorb their ideas, absorb their angle. It's going to help you think of new things. It's going to help you realize how your Brazilian perspective is different than the perspective of a maker in the United States or Canada or the UK. Pick 10 people you admire and read everything they write. I only discovered this myself about a year ago, where I realized that the articles that I like the best, and the blog posts that I like the best, and the tweets that I like the best, they tended to come from the same small group of people. So even though I follow 2,000 people on Twitter, and I read almost all the tweets that come into my feed every day, I started to see a pattern, that there were this small group that I needed to pay closer attention to. I needed to give them priority. And so I set up certain things with my Twitter account to make sure that I saw every tweet that they made and every blog post that they wrote. Because these are people who I think see the world in a really interesting and enlightened way. The best thing you can do is pick these people and eventually get in touch with them. The more that you read their tweets and their blog posts, the more you're prepared to reply to something. So if someone like, let's say, Mark Andreessen, the famous investor, if he writes a blog post with a certain idea, you might be able to tweet back at him and say, "Hey Mark, I remember when you wrote the opposite thing 2 years ago. Why did you change your mind?" That's a good question. He gets many, many questions on Twitter and elsewhere. But people like him, they spot the good questions. They know when you've been listening. And they'll take the time to answer you if you take the time to write to them and read them. So consider this. This is kind of the same idea. Be aware of all the people that are out there talking every day. Set up Google alerts or Twitter alerts and make sure that you know when news breaks. It's mostly because a lot of the news is going to be about new tools that can help you build new things. Are you guys familiar with FOMO? Fear of missing out? Fear of missing out is that feeling you get when you leave your phone in the car and you know that you're getting text messages. And you're like, oh, I want to know what people are saying to me. I'm saying here, don't let yourself feel FOMO about ideas. They come cheap. If you have an idea and you don't have the money to build it, or you don't have the time to build it, let it go. Don't worry about it. Treat ideas as if there are thousands of them. Become an idea factory. Don't worry. There is no idea that is so good that it will change your life. The only things that will change your life are execution. In other words, Peter Thiel said something recently that I thought was really brilliant. He said, failure is typically so overdetermined that you never figure out all the reasons that you fail. In other words, if you fail at something, chances are it was not close. You were not close to succeeding. And you shouldn't beat yourself up about why didn't this work? Why couldn't I do it better? Just keep trying. Trends happen over decades, not months. So technology journalists like myself are really fond of writing about new trends. And the problem is we typically talk about them in too small a space. So a trend like drones seems to us to be quite mature at this point. The fact that this thing exists and that you can buy these online for a few $100s would suggest that there is no room left in the world of drones to do something new. But in fact, drones are a technology that are in the very beginning of their lives. In 20 years, you'll still be able to build a drone company and take it public and make billions of dollars. Or create a drone project that no one has seen before, that really touches people. These things are so new that nobody knows what's going to happen. The same thing with wearable computing. Even though there are Fitbits and rings that light up when you have a text message, this is just the very beginning of useful wearable technology. So don't become discouraged when big companies are doing things that you want to do. Because when a technology is big enough, like wearable, like Internet of Things, like drones, like 3D printing. 3D printing is the best example. No one has any idea how to make money with a 3D printer. No one has a clue. And it's probably going to be 10 years before someone takes a company public that makes 3D printed objects, besides the actual 3D printer. This one is very important. Pay attention to demographic changes. The way that you can introduce something new into the world is by paying attention to how people are changing. So in the United States, for example, I am called a millennial because I was born in 1984. There are more of my generation than my parents' generation. In fact, there are a lot more of us. This fundamentally changes the makeup of the country. So as our parents retire, there will be a need for all kinds of new products and services for all these old people who we didn't have 20 years ago. And at the same time, there's going to be a demand for products and services that serve my generation as adults. So Brazil is a country that is also changing demographically. It's growing a lot. So look at how the country is growing. And if you're making art, try to express some of the tension about the growth. If you're making something for a business, look for a new market where people are not being served and they need something very badly. They have a product, they have a problem that needs to be solved and no one's solving it. This is really the key to most successful businesses. If you look at something like Uber, Uber is a great experiment, but Uber, my parents would never use it. They're used to hailing a cab like this. They think that's really easy. They don't see any problem with it. But in my generation, we want to do everything with the phone. And that's a demographic change that creates an opportunity for something new. Understand the true definition of innovation. The definition of innovation, which no one ever talks about because it's very boring sounding, is increased yield with the same technology. So I put a picture of a cotton gin here. It used to be when you farmed cotton that you'd have to pick the seeds out of the cotton before you could turn it into thread. And then this guy invented the cotton gin, and suddenly clothing became far cheaper. This would pick all the seeds out of the cotton and turn it into thread very quickly. Better yield with the same technology. This thing is made of wood. Right? He didn't have to invent anything except to put pieces together. Think like a programmer, one step at a time. A lot of entrepreneurs, when they imagine, or artists, when they imagine their project, it looks like this, right? You can't build this, at least not the first time around. Go for this. Do a good job with this. If you can do a good job with something simple, you can eventually build it into something like this. But programmers are particularly brilliant at understanding that every project has to come step by step, that you can't do everything at once. And when you have a project in mind, especially if it's expensive and you need to buy parts, things like that, really consider what is the bare minimum that I can make something awesome using. In 2014, design is what sets your product apart. So design is not pretty graphics. As I'll say in the next slide, I'll talk more about this. But design is purpose. Design is knowing exactly what something's for. So I don't know if you guys recognize this. This is a little radio, an FM radio, that was built in the 1960s by a German company named Braun. And Apple has copied many, many Braun products. It's not just this. Dieter Rams, yes, exactly. He's a famous industrial designer. And the reason he's so famous is because you look at this thing and you know it's a radio. It only has one button. This is Sean Rad. He created Tinder. So I'm not calling him a pretty face. I'm just saying design means your product has a message, not a pretty face. So you can put nice graphics on something, but that doesn't change how it works. What's interesting about Tinder is that he told me one time in an interview, I built Tinder because I didn't think that in 2013 that guys like me should have to face rejection. This is a very honest feeling that he expressed to me, that it bothered him that he would walk up to a girl in a bar and he had no idea if she was single, and he felt like he faced too much rejection. And in 2013, when we had this interview, he knew that Facebook existed and Facebook knows if you're single or married, and he thought, we shouldn't have to live this way anymore. So the message behind Tinder is you shouldn't need to face tons of rejection just to date somebody that is compatible with you. When you have a product or a project or anything with a message, people can connect with it because they know how you're trying to change the world, and they know why. So if it's clear to you, it will become clear in the actual project. Don't think like a programmer. I know I said that you should 2 minutes ago, but software needs to evoke feelings. So programmers many times get obsessed with solving a certain technical challenge or doing something that has never been done before with code. But don't forget that whatever that code does, it needs to make somebody somewhere feel a feeling. If they don't feel feelings, they will not like your project. They will forget about it right away. Spend nearly nothing and succeed anyway. You guys probably read Reddit, right? So Reddit, for anybody who doesn't know, is a social news site. It's very popular. Alexis Ohanian, who created Reddit, spent about $50 making stickers when he first launched the site in 2007, and it now gets something like 40 million unique visitors a month. He started with stickers. He didn't buy billboards. He didn't hire a PR team or a marketing team. He just built something that was really useful and really fun, and just did this because he wanted to. Don't be afraid to go it alone. This is my last slide, and I think it's the most important. I meet a lot of entrepreneurs who I can tell have great ideas, and they may even have great projects, but I can see already that they're fighting with their co-founder. Anytime you're working on a project, I really believe there's only room for one vision for the project. There can only be one person who really sees what should be made. And everyone in the group who works on this project needs to be clear who is the person with the vision. Whose vision are we executing? Too often, a project will get to a certain stage and the founders start fighting because they think, I think it should be like this, and you think it should be like that. Don't take on a partner in a project unless you absolutely have to. Have the confidence to do it yourself, because it'll probably turn out better. And that way, if you fail, you'll know it was something that you did. And if you succeed, you'll know it was something that you did. And you'll have no one to fight with. You'll only have friends to ask advice from. So that's my final point. Does anyone have any questions? Thanks for listening, everybody.